Welcome, everybody, to today's Mentor Time. This is a very interesting topic, at least for me. We did this just about a year ago when skills-based hiring was a big thing being announced a lot. And I wanted to talk about it today as a topic because it's growing. We're hearing more about it, but I'm also very aware that it's not experience, and we'll talk about what that means. First, I want to give you the takeaway. No matter what they call it, we still need experience as a basis, even in the era of skills-based hiring. Here's what I've been hearing from people. Sue, I've been reskilling, but I don't have a job yet, but I don't know what else I can reskill for. People are asking, how do I show my many certifications, which are usually you've learned something. I think they mean certificates more than certifications, but they could be actual certifications as well. And some people tell me, Sue, I have so many skills across so many different jobs, and here's just a sample of them. How do I incorporate every single thing into a 2-page resume? All really good questions. So would you put a number 1 in the chat if you have heard about skills-based hiring before, even if you can't tell me a definition of it, or a 0 if you have not heard of it yet? I've got a 0. Thank you, Nilafar. Hiram says yes, and Sheila says yes. Okay, great. So we know that some people are aware of this and others aren't. And here's what we're going to do to walk through this today. First, I'm going to talk about what it is and a little bit of what it isn't. Then we're going to talk about companies needing agility. This seems to be one of the key points about skills-based hiring. And in Mentor Time, we always leave with this section, what should you do? And I did some of what should you do on your behalf to try to jumpstart you when we get there. So we'll start right away with skills. But before we go into actually what skills-based hiring is, I want to talk to you about a continuum of learning to experience. It's got 3 steps in it. Learning, as many of us probably could define in some fashion, is an activity that introduces new information to us, or maybe updated, but generally it's pretty new. We get a skill when we have that knowledge, plus we've had guided practice. And that's why I often tell people who have group projects in graduate school, they aren't necessarily experienced, but you've gained skills in it. Experience comes at the end when you're actually using the skill in real world settings, usually validated by end users. You've got a client, you've got a group you're working with. There's some external force besides in graduate school, the professor who gives you a grade. So, yes or no, have you heard of this continuum or something similar? This is how I talk about it. Before, I know several of you do training. You may not have thought about it exactly like this. Ron says yes. Nilafar says yes. Sheila says yes. That's great. Good. I figured you all had. A lot of you do training as part of your job. Hiram says no. As I said, it's not absolute. Some people construct it a little differently, but this is the quick way to think about it. So let's talk about skills-based hiring. Instead of giving you a definition, because the definition's incorporated in what I'm going to show you, I'm going to compare what we have in what they're calling traditional role, R-O-L-E, like your job role hiring versus skills-based hiring. So this was something from handshake.com. It was a nice summary saying, role-based hiring screens for education, credentials, and experience. And I argue that you can't take out experience from what we're going to be talking about skills-based hiring, but they say skills-based hiring is screening for competencies. I'm going to warn you, probably you'd all notice whether I told you or not, that there are inconsistencies in what I'm quoting, because sometimes it goes for skill-based competency and sometimes for role-based. So not everybody can even get all the actual line between the two straight. So if we think about a traditional role-based hiring, in the past it has been a certain level of a degree, certain level of education, maybe credentials. For example, when I was out of nursing school, I had to pass my boards and become a licensed nurse, but then I had a certification as a nurse practitioner. Those would be credentials. And then experience. This is a quote from the article that is cited there, and those who are new, I will send out references when I send out the recording link tomorrow. It'll be edited. So these are candidate skills that are applicable to the role. And in my mind, that means you're just stepping one step back from experience. But this became a big discussion 3 or 4 years ago when we had a lot of talk about biases in job hiring, that you were unfairly disadvantaging people that might not have degree but had work experience that they could apply. And they give this example here of someone who knows Python and can use Python but doesn't have a computer science degree. Traditional role-based is looking at complex problem solving as a competency. That's what I said, competency on both sides of the definition required for a position. And then skills-based is ability to identify problems and take in and develop a solution. And those who've worked with me a lot know I never want you to say things like able to, understanding of. That doesn't tell me anything other than you have some knowledge about it. So it's inconsistent, but basically, in my mind, for a long time that I've been hearing about this, it is a way that they are defining skills as a replacement for experience or the first initiation of it. However, there are some things that are seemingly coming out that weren't here a year ago when we were talking about it. And that is skills-based hiring. People are now viewing your job title or a job as, they don't say it's going away, but they say employees will be matched to tasks and projects. Now, a couple of you were on this mentor time several weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, when we talked about, again, you have to be prepared to be freelancer, solopreneur, consultant, contractor. There's going to be jobs where people will not be working as employees. To me, this being matched to tasks and projects sounds like you're now again in charge. You're always in charge of your career, but the company's going to make you in charge of your career or decide where to put you. And this came from the same fuel50.com. Deloitte did a report that talks about traditional models for role-based hiring aren't designed for agility, and companies need agility now. Now, one thing I will say, the bottom of the paragraph talks about moving towards this approach to have the organizations be able to stay agile. There was a comment that this requires they stated it this way, a meticulous assessment of the candidate to job fit. And I don't know that HR people are or aren't doing these meticulous assessments. We'll hear a little bit more about them in a few minutes. So let's go on to companies needing agility, because this seems to be from the reports I just cited and read a little background on. It's what the company needs in terms of moving around employees and having who they need. Now, frankly, they could hire skills-based hiring without even calling it skills-based hiring if they really wanted to apply themselves differently. But as we go forward, I was surprised that way back in 2022, we were already over 75% of companies saying that they were using skill-based hiring practices. Now, answering that on a survey, you all are from public health and global development. You know that doesn't necessarily mean they answered it in terms of what their company's really doing. And then HR people were saying that their hires were better based on this. The supposition in the last year is what's in the gray in the last paragraph. Now there are tools and skills tests, things that are readily available that weren't available even 2 years ago, to make this more feasible. So we're back again to this term competencies, this word, hiring for competencies. And this is a study, I'd never seen these exact numbers, but I knew that many companies felt that they would rather hire on people's attitudes, personality, time management, because they could teach them technical skills. They couldn't make the what we've traditionally called soft skills, people skills. It's harder to train on. So this is a reason that role-based hiring still exists in many ways. I'm now calling this task to task, this role-based the skills-based hiring is not a job or a title. I don't know how they can get away with no job title. There's going to be something when they recruit. But Deloitte calls it liberating work and workers, the Deloitte report, from the confines of the job. And I was thinking back to when I was still working for many years. I didn't have a set job where I sat at my desk and did X and Y all day long. I was constantly moving around. And I know several of you on here very well. I'm sure your experience was more like mine. But it seems it'll be task to task. And then that led me to this when I saw the next part of the Deloitte report that you would organize a portfolio of the way that you've packaged your work together or you've packaged your work because of the assignments you're giving. And so it reminded me of our talk a couple weeks ago on how you make a career portfolio for your portfolio career, which is basically piecing together pieces of work in your portfolio career. So there's no definitive movement forward on this that I can tell without talking about skills-based hiring. And it may be that it's the latest and greatest fad that's come along. Every HR talent acquisition person, and I listened to several through Hung Lee, someone that is a global talent recruiter and runs a big webinar every week on different aspects of talent acquisition. So I may be wrong in this, but here's what I think is going underneath this. As we were getting more AI, remember the early days of ChatGPT, when it got easier to do last year, especially 2023, late 2023, last year, 2024, there were immediately huge savings by people being replaced or having parts of their jobs replaced by AI. So as companies are looking for more advantageous hires for the people that they need, they're needing to speed up the process. So skills lists, there's that long list I showed you in one of the things people tell me about. Those can be assessed easily by the ATS. We know they look for keywords and key phrases. And there are AI tools that can do this. And maybe people think that's more objective. I don't know. I'm just trying to give you the things that I think are underscoring it. And these skills tests that they talk about could mean more rapid assessment and more rapid hiring, which saves everybody money. But we don't know whether those tests are really assessing attitude or whether they're assessing basically some kind of experience of things you can do. A coding test is definitely needed if you're hiring a coder. I'm not sure that you would need to take a personality test to be a customer service manager. We all need good people skills in some fashion. I don't know that they need to be very different. And I don't know enough about this to make a knowledgeable statement, but I can tell you that it really concerns me when we're going to the easy check answer rather than taking the time to ensure we understand people's experience. One of the studies, and I saw this mentioned in several places, this is in a Forbes study reported through the Handshake article. They say that skills-based hiring is more predictive of future performance than hiring on work experience. So I want to stop there and ask you to describe one positive thing you've heard today or you know about in the past that skills-based hiring might help you as a job seeker or eventually getting a promotion, whatever line of your career path you're in. Nilüfer has a good point. In the health sector that's highly regulated, you definitely need certain credentials to be able to deliver your work. And I totally agree, for sure. Ron will comment later. He said, yeah, I'm glad. That's fine, Ron. Just don't forget it. I want to hear it. I had a positive response to the idea that some of this could mean is documented to not just mean less bias, but means a better match in job fit, apparently. Does the skill include attitude and soft skills? Yes. Yes. It includes any skills. That's what I'm concerned about. They just talk about skills-based hiring, and skills could be the hard skills for our technical work. Tell me about maternal child health. Hiram says, I think it'll make it easier to change career paths. That there is that. We've talked about transferable skills when we can get people's attention. Thank you, everybody. All right. So I want to wind up before what should you do with an article from the Harvard Business Review. And note that this is Harvard because number 6 is definitely because it's Harvard or because it's a university. They had an interesting article and they ended it with 6 steps that managers could do and needed to do to take forward skills-based hiring. The two in the middle that are highlighted are reverse engineer success. And what they're saying about that is study your success stories carefully because they have your experience in there that contains indicators of a candidate's potential for high achievement. So they need to do that both for the hiring people, but they also need to do it for their own company. What kinds of success are we getting out of people with what kinds of backgrounds? The third one is like anything else in any hiring we do. Define the requirements and what's the acceptable evidence for ability to manage a program. Again, you can probably tell where I land on this. And the last one said acknowledge that many jobs do require a college degree. I'm less likely to agree on that. I think there's lived experience, lived work experience that you can use. But that's a small point. They do say that the manager should have experience using skills-based promotion internally in their company before they try to do hiring externally. All right, so what does this mean for you? How can you go forward? I thought this was an interesting table of job postings for the two kinds of skills-based postings and traditional. And the requirement says it lists what the candidate must be able to do. On the traditional, lists what the candidate must have done or studied. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. But if they're able to do it, they must have had some experience. It could be that their experience is at the skill level because they haven't applied it to a real world setting. That's a possibility. But other than this, there wasn't a whole lot of differentiation other than the lack of requirement for the education part of a degree. So I asked Google, find me a skill-based job posting and what should it have in it? So they made up something and it has key competencies. This is a customer service support representative. Communication, problem solving, customer service, technology proficiency. I don't know any job nowadays that doesn't have that. We all have to have these skills. And then they have preferred skills. First one is experience. It's not able to. Second one is knowledge of troubleshooting techniques, and then experience with a specific industry. So it went on to say, here's why this is a job posting that is skills-based hiring, because it emphasizes competencies, it has clear skill descriptions, and it focuses on what matters. But I couldn't get it to find a job, an actual job posting. So I went over to Perplexity, which I use, and asked it first to find me 2 job postings, and I detailed the whole thing of what I wanted. Neither one was relevant. It pushed me to something that was a typical job posting we're all used to seeing, with desired tasks or responsibilities and then required and preferred qualifications. Then I asked it to do 2 more, and one of the 2 was this job. This job, oh, sorry, let me back up. I think I skipped over it. So it came up with this job, and this is the summary from Perplexity. And the 2 I highlighted demonstrate excellent organizational project management and communication skills and apply a trust-based philanthropy approach. And it lists the skills emphasized, but again, those skills are also woven into what the responsibilities are. It turns out the whole job posting was not a skills-based job posting that I could identify, and not from the elements that Google said should be in there, but it looked exactly like everything else. The only thing I could see was highlighted in yellow, the project management, where it said excellent organizational blah, 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 and project management. And I'm parsing this very finely. There's really almost no difference in it. But there are people for whom this approach may be helpful. This is an article on older workers, but they're also talking about people who have gaps for some reason, people who have gone back and reskilled, the ways in which our job market, the job applicants are very different nowadays. And they say that when you can write a skills-based resume now, why you'd want to do that would be because you can eliminate the discussion about job gaps. You could focus on the most desirable skills and what you've brought and emphasize your transferable skills. But the drawbacks are pretty serious. This resume begins to sound like a functional resume, which I have never liked seeing because it describes a whole area of technical expertise, and I have no idea where you did it, when, for how long. That's what this says. You lack context by not having it in reverse chron order, and you could omit some things that wouldn't necessarily be in there but would be important in an application. But the biggest one would be, I don't know that employers and hiring managers are ready to see these kinds of resumes. Now, what do these resumes look like? I found one template I searched probably for 15 or 20 minutes trying to get at an actual template. This is the only one I saw that actually looks like a skills-based resume and named itself that. And so you can see there's still a summary at the top, and then there's skills, and they have skill, and under every skill, they're listing achievements, which means you've done something, you have the experience, and it's not just ability to do something. And then you have a little bit of area for your recent experience and an action, verb, and evidence-based result, basically. I think we're really early on in the decision about how you write your resume. And my advice for you is you're going to continue to focus on evidence-based results for your experience, but you can now incorporate storytelling that includes skill areas and skills, like the discussion we'll have when we talk about transferable skills. And you can help yourself. This is the page 1 of a 2-page template that I use in the course that I've given to people, where I incorporated about almost 2 years ago now, taking a leaf from what I learned from LinkedIn about putting your top 3 skills for every job you have, so that those are what we call credibility cues. It catches the eye really quickly, but also gets people to see, oh, she not only directed this office, she did a lot of stakeholder engagement as part of it, because that's the first skill, which should be the most important one. So I don't think there's a huge hitch in the road. I do think that the burden is on the companies to make it clear what they're assessing in the skills-based hiring tests. But as far as I can tell so far, no job postings, even the one that said that Perplexity said might be a skills-based one, doesn't even lean mostly to it that I can see. So I have a whole lot of these references are all in the back. I'm going to go back to this slide and ask Ron for comments or questions, and then I'll check the chat.
Wow.
You can
I
tell
am,
where I land, right?
well, I'm glad you did this presentation and not me. Uh, because I have, you know what it is? I think it reminds me of back in the 70s, early 70s, I'm going to say, for some of you weren't born yet, early 70s, when we talked about multimedia. And then that was a slideshow with a tape recorder that controlled the slides and so on. Then multimedia became this and then that and that. Anyway, it strikes me as being watching an idea because the idea hasn't changed at all. What it is, they're putting new language around it. And for me, what I'm hearing here is this is trying to get around the fact that hiring managers and or people who own the job, either the supervisors or the bosses, haven't got the first clue how to describe the work they want done. And all they can do is talk in terms of this is your responsibilities, but they don't really know how. And so by thinking through the idea that, oh, there must be some skills that will support those responsibilities and coming up with something to do that. That's what it strikes me to be. You and I, Sue, we've seen some really horrific examples when we're doing the resume step where you see job postings that are just dreadful. And my wife, Liz, she has gone to some where it was really bizarre to the point where the person who originally wrote up the job ends up interviewing her for a position and she interviews them because they haven't got the first clue what they're doing. Having said all that, having said all that, I'm not biased. What It's funny because the first comment I had on was this business of accomplishments. And some years ago, many years ago, we came up with the idea of accomplishments based training. And so often we talk about skills training and all the rest of it. So, accomplishments based training really is about the achievements and so on and the work that you have to do and teaching people to actually accomplish stuff. And so, rather than learning about the knowledge and so on and then telling you what they're going to do, they actually have to do it. I mean, that's what all training ought to be is as an opportunity to actually practice in some meaningful way. And so for my mind, like I was thinking, because we have that little thing we did on the second course where we're looking into the idea of skills testing in the selection process. And
Right.
so for me, there is an opportunity for an employer to actually use scenarios or something and say it. And it's a common practice in the military. In fact, to become an officer of the watch in a ship, you got to do it. And then they have interviews and they run you through problem scenarios and how are you going to handle this and what you do. Now, that's not quite the same as actually watching you do it, but the mental exercise and mental gymnastics you go through to prove that you know what to do in those circumstances. And it should be right. It should be like that as far as they're concerned. So these are skills. And most of them, the skills we're talking about, I think are really soft skills. Like when they talk in here about agility, the first thing that I'm thinking of, agility means soft skill, or what you and I call soft skill, or transfer. I prefer transferable skill, but those are skills that will move from one job to another, one task to another. That makes you agile because I can problem solve, I can lead, I can manage a project. Just give me the subject area. Oh, yeah, okay, I'll find subject matter experts who help me, whatever. And then you get on and you do a great job because you have the capacity to use these skills that you've already proven and you know because you've got the accomplishments and you go do it. So for my mind, it's just wow. And eventually what my comment was, seems like it's really all about the people and so on. Oh, and the one example you showed where it had you struggled to find even examples. So there's one example where you have the skills list and then the experience. And so that actually reminds me that I see why it's like the functional resume. So it's a hybrid resume where you've got the job functions and then you've got an experience list and so on. And I can see how that might have some value. But once again, I agree with you. I said functional resumes are a good idea under very limited circumstances, in my opinion. And but for the most part, I like the strategy that you show here. And the idea of posting your skills associated, like top three skills you point out. So three skills associated with that particular accomplishment area. And there you are. You've got the skills there. It's going to be picked up. So I think this particular model that we've been using for a while, especially the addition of the skills, will accomplish whatever, I'm guessing, will accomplish whatever was is desired behind this. Like you say, I'm not sure I see the difference, frankly, other than it's a cheater's way of trying to somehow for HR to somehow say what they really want and what they want as a miracle child. And anyway, off you go. Anyway, but I'm being quite reserved in my comment.
I think the focus on hiring for HR people has them needing to use all these AI tools and the skills tests and whatever as proxies for taking the time to interview people in person or in virtual person and not just the one-way video interviews. That those kinds of things are the shortcuts that are going to get us to a labor force that becomes much more like an assembly line again. And our jobs don't go towards an assembly line. You can't just say, do you have welding skills? Check, we'll hire you. The difference between among all five of us that are on this today, we can all do some version of project management. Others are way at the top. Some of us are inexperienced. I think at their peril, they're moving forward on this, but I see it all in a part with AI, with
Yeah.
less money coming in, with the economy in the US, especially going the way it's probably going to go. So,
In some ways,
oh, go ahead.
it makes sense. Sorry, Sue. In some ways,
Mhm.
that kind of makes sense because we keep saying that most of the people we work with are knowledge workers. And so AI is about knowledge, using knowledge models, word language models, et cetera, to do stuff. And so to try to accomplish that, or certainly even in this case, help the knowledge worker called the HR person to actually identify what's needed. And apparently, based on your experience trying to find it, it really doesn't quite exist yet.
Yeah.
But it's something we have to pay. I'm kind of lambasting it a little, but we do have to pay attention because it could affect certain things. And what I would hate to see is that we're giving folks a really good advantage in how to do this, and somehow we make them not the first person picked.
Because they're
Bizarre.
a test case for hiring people who haven't seen this.
Yeah,
I
it's
want to
possible.
answer this question, and then Ron, you may want to add into it. I currently list achievements under my positions. Should I rather list achievements under skills to be more convincing? I don't think so, because first of all, on your resume, as people go down, the first thing they're going to see is experience, unless you want to use the different approach. It's very hard under one skill to put all your experience. That's the beauty of writing evidence-based results, which is what Ron and I bonded over 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, and take forward is when you say that you have a large complex job and you give an achievement of staying on budget with the four distributed teams, 400 people in three different countries, whatever, you are then demonstrating not just project management, not just good communication skills. It all gets wrapped up, as we know. And I go back to something we heard for many years, which is I don't just need people sitting in seats putting in time. I need outcomes out of you all, right? I'm not counting that you show up. That's an output measure showing up at the office in the old days, putting in the hours. I need to know that Sue, you're moving your research and eval group along on the continuum of doing great work for clients, helping people get better services and health, and also, by the way, making a little bit of money doing it, for example. So I find it very off putting to put things under skills, but I didn't love the skills when LinkedIn started them. And then it was like a light bulb of, oh, if we put them under each job, you don't have to wait till the skills list at the end to say, I can use Asana and I can use Microsoft Excel for budgeting. Ron, do you have comments on this question that we got?
No, I would say the same because it's when you say achievements, I'm going to use the word accomplishments because that's just my preferred language.
Uh,
Anyway, the idea of accomplishing something of value for your employer because your employer hired you to do exactly those things and you have done it and demonstrated. And then you sit beside somebody, this is the comparison, and it's not nice. You're sitting beside somebody who's getting paid also, and they're sitting there putting in the time, but don't get anything done. And you wonder why in the world they still get a paycheck. And so that's not who we're talking to in this
mhm.
group. We're talking to people here who actually achieve stuff. They're high achievers, they accomplish things and list them. And so, in my mind, each experience, you've got demonstrated outcomes and accomplishments that you've done in those areas. Then that's why you're getting paid because the employer values the work you're doing for what it's
Thank you,
worth.
Ron. Anybody have questions? You can unmute if it's easier to unmute than type it out. I appreciate either way. This is for you all. I didn't even go 45 minutes yet. I'm going to say thank you all for the discussion, for the questions and comments you brought up. Ron and I learned so much from each of you with your wisdom and with you hearing things as we're beginning to talk about it. I've been living in my brain for the last week with this topic, and I just kept thinking I was missing something till I realized no one could find anything. So thank you to those who were able to come. A couple people let me know that they're looking forward to getting the recording, and I'll ask Ron to close the meeting now, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for showing up. And I'm glad I made the session. Tardy is better than nothing. And so thank you, everyone, for being here. And I look forward to it the next time we get together. These sessions, I think, are valuable, as Sue says, for both of us and for you. I trust that's why you come. So thanks very much and see you again.